Welcome to Have a Life Teaching, the podcast designed for educators who are dedicated to enhancing their teaching practice and creating a positive impact on their students' lives. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of education, exploring a wide range of topics related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment in K-12 schools. Together, we'll learn from the brightest minds in the education field. So if you're a passionate educator who's ready to take your teaching practice to the next level, join us as we explore the exciting world of education. My name is John Shimbari, signing in and saying, let's have a life teaching. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Have a Life Teaching podcast. As listeners might know from following the show, we've had a few episodes talking about the importance not just of teaching academic content, but life skills. We also recently had an episode on competency-based learning and how that differs from standards-based learning, where standards-based learning is based on students reaching mastery in an academic standard or an academic goal, whereas competency-based learning still finds that important and you still want to meet that academic goal, but also what are those life skills that we should be teaching at the same time? So I'm always excited to continue this conversation because I do think that these life skills are a major component, or should be at least a major component, of 21st century learning frameworks, particularly when we're entering a world with the speed in which technology is morphing and developing, where we don't know what specific jobs are going to be there in the future for our students. But yet what we do know is those core competencies and those life skills that students are probably going to need to thrive in any world, regardless of the tech. So with that in mind, I'm really excited to be joined by my two guests tonight, whom I've known for a while, and they are Maureen Chapman and James Simons. They are co-directors and founders of Core Creative Partners, which is an education consultancy in the Northeast Boston region. And congratulations, by the way, my guest. They have a new book out called Leaders of the Class, Units for Teaching Motivation, Perseverance, Communication, and Collaboration in the Secondary Classroom. So James and Maureen, thank you for joining us today. So my first question is this: why this interest in developing these more or less life skills and ways of being as a special thing on top of our teachers preparing your students through academic knowledge and content? And I guess we'll start with Maureen and then we'll go with James.
Sure. I think that when James and I were both classroom teachers on the same grade level team, a middle school team, we both moved into leadership and found ourselves one day in leadership positions without any formal training. I was a curriculum director, he was a dean of students, and then a high school principal. And so we were working together so closely and developing our friendship really through shared purpose and important work. And then through the pandemic, we just felt the weight of the crisis of joy in school. There were so many people across the setting of school in tears, just not feeling motivated, teachers crying in our office, students not attending, families feeling at a loss. And we just felt compelled to serve in a different way. And when we asked ourselves, what could we do to contribute in service of this important field, we felt like we had a particular set of experiences with addressing the whole child in a secondary setting, which is developmentally different than it is in a primary school setting. And so that language looks different in so many places, like you've named life skills or social emotional learning or 21st century skills. And I think that the more we've dedicated ourselves to exploring this in partnership with not only the depth of experience we had in one setting, but now with leaders and teachers in so many settings, we really came to appreciate the overlap with what is traditionally reserved for leaders in leadership training program that we were figuring out on the fly as school leaders. So many students in middle school and in high school are deciding how they see themselves and who they are. But we felt there was a way to present to each student and through each class this identity of you are a leader, and every single person can see themselves as a leader for being who they are. If we're teaching the science skills and we're teaching how to understand our motivation, understand how we persevere, and so on, these skills are strengthening each other and they make sense together for the adolescent student. So that's a bit of why.
And I'm glad that you corrected me because what I really meant to say is that we shouldn't just be looking at those academic standards, but how are we building in these whole child frameworks, particularly on a secondary level. But before we do, James, how about you? What prompted this passion in you?
I would echo everything Maureen said so eloquently. And then I think I would just add these skills are just so inherent to the work of every discipline. And during the pandemic, when social emotional crises were at a high point, we were often hearing people talk about social emotional support in opposition to academic support. I'm here to do math with these students, and the counselor is telling me that instead we need to do breathing exercises. And so there became this tension. A lot of educators felt such care and concern for kids who are suffering. And then also, we're worried if we shift our attention to social and emotional well being, we are lowering our expectations. And that isn't actually supportive of kids. We got to hold high expectations. We got to help every student reach those expectations. And we quickly realized that the same skills that you need to reflect and set goals, to persevere in the face of challenges as you move towards those goals, to communicate in a way that's authentic to who you are, but also appropriate to the setting that you're in. And lastly, the skills to collaborate, to through that communication, get some meaningful stuff done. Those skills apply to math and to science and to art and to English and to social studies, because at the core, those are just human skills. And whatever room we're in, whatever textbook is on our desk, we are humans. And so if we can really focus on these skills in addition to the academic technical skills, we are supporting kids for well-being and success now and in some future that we can't even begin to imagine what it will be like.
Exactly. And you were both touching upon something that I want to bring back. Both of you were mentioning the importance that it's not an either or, it's an and and a both. Where,
Yeah.
yes, we still need to prepare those students in their academic content. Even before COVID, teachers have been saying, I'm a math teacher or I'm a social studies teacher on the elementary level, definitely on the high school level. So my question is this, since it does need to be an and both, how do we integrate these life competencies while we're teaching our academic content, particularly in a secondary classroom? And how does that whole child focus on a secondary classroom differ from what you would see in an elementary classroom?
I know it's a really good question. And I think we have done extensive work I was 2 years coaching preschool K and one on the floor with the kids all the way up through high school. And I just absolutely love teaching. I always wanted to be a teacher and I never cared what grade because there's just so much joy and similarity across all of it. And when you're spending time in an elementary school classroom, your teacher's with you probably all day. You are probably having a morning circle or doing a responsive classroom model. You are having special lessons about, let's talk about being part of the community. Let's talk about friendship. And the kids are throwing their hands in the air and they want to tell you everything that ever happened. And they are not holding back. And elementary school kids are like messing around socially, but they have no maybe awareness of the stakes of being left out that you're going to see come on very strongly in middle and high school. So you have these distinct lessons that tend to go very well and are built on strong relationships that go through your whole day. And yeah, I do think you see a lot of engagement and buy-in from elementary school teachers about that being part of their job, and they have the freedom of that full day as well in which to work that in middle school, you have so many wonderful grade level team models where you have a seventh grade team, an eighth grade team who meet together, who share the same students, perhaps. And also, you're seeing developmentally that these students are going to roll their eyes. Maybe the teacher has a scripted curriculum, and the kids are like, come on, we all know this is 30 minutes we're getting through before we get to the real stuff. And every student has a different set of teachers who may or may not have the opportunity to work together. And then you have a high school setting where every child has a different set of teachers, and those teachers may not have an opportunity to work together and think about one child holistically. So people get really zoned in on their content. But what's really wonderful is that as you're trying to develop students' self awareness and their emotional intelligence to understand who they are and what they're like, you have this data of your class that's so rich for examining. So if you want to ask students about if they're motivated, then are you providing work with which they can assess, was I motivated today? If the answer is yes, you have a chance to get into helping them be more aware of their motivation. If you are giving hard work that's going to require them to probably get frustrated sometimes, then congratulations, you have provided a rich opportunity for them to become more self-aware about what happens to them when they encounter challenge and what they did and what they tried, what they didn't try, and just be more using the classroom experiences you were providing anyway as data for exploration for students to understand themselves better. And so it's just framing these reflections and goal setting and these opportunities for students to become more self-aware through looking at their classwork. We really like the approach of taking the skills slowly and really starting with a spaciousness around motivation and understanding what is motivating to you and why, and what goals are you setting, and just giving that time before you move on and try to get into the complexity of things that involve multiple people and exchange and so on.
But it was about 30 years after Kiss's prime, and all the audience was leaving by the time they came out. And that's how I'm feeling as I'm hearing Maureen really expertly respond to your question. I guess what I would say, which again will be reiterating some of what Maureen so beautifully articulated, is it is different, but also I think it's important to emphasize it's the same. And that is true at all developmental levels. We got into this work of teaching students leadership skills because we were doing SEL work and we were supporting school leaders with leadership development. And we suddenly realized, whoa, we're doing the same thing. We're helping students build self-awareness skills. We're helping school leaders build self-awareness skills. And so by extension, when you look at the work that a high school student is doing and a primary school student is doing, it is the same. It is differentiated to be developmentally appropriate, but it is the same thing. An example is in a kindergarten class, we're talking about how we are feeling. And maybe we're pointing to a picture of the mad face or the happy face. And then when we're in secondary school, it's important to continue to be talking about how we're feeling. The difference is we're looking for more nuanced communication. And as a result, we're looking to be using more nuanced emotional awareness tools. So we love using the mood meter, which is a tool developed by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And it is a grid. And on the x-axis, it goes from low pleasantness to high pleasantness feelings. And on the y-axis, it goes from low energy to high energy. And so then within each quadrant, there are as many boxes as you need to put as many words as are appropriate for the students and for the setting. Maybe you are in an English class and you are studying Shakespeare and you're going to put some Shakespearean words in there. Or maybe you're working with a lot of multilingual learners and you are going to put in some words from their home language and really leverage that strength as they're building these skills. Or maybe it's all blank, and the students themselves are doing the work of generating that word bank. The kids are doing the exact same thing that they were years ago when they were in kindergarten. The difference is just the depth and the complexity and the opportunity to really wed it to deep, complex academic work as well.
I love that example. And I hope if anyone takes away anything from this episode, I hope they take away that example you gave, James, because it also ties into vocabulary development as well. Connection between the feelings and academic content. And that actually gets us right into my next question. And I'll go with James on this since you more or less started us down the path. That's a great activity to do within a lesson. But your book does talk about units to integrate motivation, perseverance, collaboration. So, can you walk us through what those units look like?
Absolutely. So they are intended to be paired with your academic content. And in each unit, we introduce routines which are designed to continue to pop up through future units, both academic units and future units of our sequential leadership framework. And so with motivation, it's really focused on the skills of reflection and setting goals. And so whenever you're learning something for the first time, you're going to have a greater concentration on the discrete skills that the routine requires. But then, say, once you have learned to write a paragraph, you keep writing paragraphs. It's just the focus is shifting. You're going from learning to write to writing to learn. And so, similarly, after the motivate unit, kids continue to set goals, but they're really tied to the focus of the units that follow. So it goes motivate, persevere, communicate, collaborate. Through each unit, students are building a leader profile, which is our version of a learner profile. And there are sections in the profile to set goals related to each unit. This is my goal for perseverance. And here are the strategies that I will try when the work gets hard. This is my goal for communication. And these are the strengths that I bring to my pursuit of that goal. These are the strategies I will try, etc. And I think what's really powerful about the introduction of these routines is they really enhance the academic work while also building strong relationships and just fostering a really joyful, safe space to be doing the scary work, the vulnerable work of engaging in hard academic tasks. Once we get to the communicate unit, kids are now setting goals about their communication. Okay, we're about to have a 10-minute class discussion. I'm going to set a goal for this discussion. And for one student, that might be, I want to ask more questions. For another student, it might be, I want to say something, like just one thing once. I want to build up the courage to talk in this discussion. And once you share with others where you're headed, you're so much more likely to be on the right track and to be getting support from those along the road as you pass them. And we've seen this time and again in secondary school classrooms where a student will set a goal like that. I just want to participate a little more. And they will share it as a part of a pre-communication sharing routine. And then other kids will go, oh, I can help you with that. And you'll hear someone go, Lily, what do you think? And suddenly that scary thing just feels a little safer for Lily. And she's that much more likely to be reaching that communication specific goal that she set.
So, my question is, are teachers doing this? Is the school picking one subject area to do this, or are all the teachers doing the units sequentially at the same time in their classes?
We know people are coming in different contexts with different goals for themselves. And I think the idea of co-constructing is foundational to leadership. We can't tell people what to do, right? Like you have to bring yourself to it. Just like with students, you have to supply some of the emotion words. And we know we can't tell middle school or high school students how they're feeling. They can only tell us, and we can be here to hear it. In terms of working on it, if you're one teacher, you could pick one or all units to do, even if the rest of your school wasn't doing anything, because it is contained in your classroom where you have some level of control. If you are on a grade level team that wants to implement together, we provide guidance on what to consolidate. So if we're going to do a core values exercise as part of the launch, because each unit has a few launch exercises, then these templated reflections. So like after each communication, you might bring this reflection. So students are collecting that data. And then a very short culminating performance task where they're putting together what they think about all the data they've collected on themselves and stamping their understanding, as James said, on their leader profile. So if you are going to do, for example, the core values exercise, it would say, if you're doing this on a team, only have students do this once. We're not going to ask the students to do core values in periods 2, 3, and 5. They are designed to have real usability and not to be overwhelming. And also they could stand alone. So if you wanted to really focus on students' ability to exchange feedback, and that's been a problem point for you, and you're feeling like you give assignments back and kids shove it in the bottom of their bag, or they're saying things to each other that are either just too nice, like great job, and they're not really digging in with each other, or they are saying things in a way that's being received abrasively and hurting feelings. And you're coming from, I want to address something that's going on that's important to me as a process. The exchange of feedback is a very emotional process, even for adults. You could just do the communicate chapter or a tool from the communicate chapter. And in the book, it really does lay out, here's the handout you could use for your feedback. And so there's a lot of flexibility for someone to be able to say, I want to do some or parts or all of this alone or in connection with others in my school.
But that there's applicability if a team wants to use it, say, in a PLC, or if the school wants to tie it to their overall school values and goals and portraits of graduates and that kind of thing, which I do see as another really nice connection. And we have had one show, I have to still publish it, on a portrait of a graduate. So there's definitely that tie in there. But, and now this next question could be either of you. This sounds wonderful that, again, it's a tool designed to help individual high school students to become self-reflective, to increase their efficacy. Really, again, those life skills, those whole child activities that we want to develop in our students. So my next question is this. Again, both of you do a lot of work in your consulting firm with schools on this and in other aspects of school improvement work. What have been some of those joyous moments where schools have taken the ideas that you've now collected in a book, ran with them, and the angels started singing? Do you want to talk us through one or two of those examples?
What I think of immediately is in our book, we have a perseverance tool, and it starts with brainstorming what are the things that get in the way when I am trying to engage in this work? When and why do I get stuck? And then there's the opportunity to collaboratively brainstorm what are strategies people could try when they start to slow down or get stuck. And then the last piece is a reflection log that enables students to really pinpoint, when do I usually get stuck? What are the strategies that I suspect might work with me? Okay, great. We've worked with a lot of different teachers who have chosen to use versions of this Perseverance Strategy Bank and Perseverance Strategy Tracker. And we've had teachers who do it one-on-one with a student who's really struggling to engage and find success. We've worked with teachers who've done it with full classes. And in both cases, we often hear teachers just surprised and delighted, like, that actually worked. That legitimately worked. And that's been our experience too. When you give kids the keys to the car, they're not going to drive it off the cliff. They want to get to their destination too. And so it's a nice tool because it's really putting kids in the driver's seat in determining what are the things that get in the way? What do I want to try? And then last time I tried that, how did it go? And what should I do with this new data that I've collected as a result?
And I think too, kids don't always, they're wondering if we mean it when we ask them their opinion. And these tools really always put it back to kids. You tell me, I want to see. And we talk about in this field making thinking visible. We should also talk about making feelings visible, especially in the adolescent years. Their brains are really fully developed in like producing emotions, but not yet in controlling impulses. And so they are very feeling. And those feelings are very much in play in terms of how they're performing in our class, but we don't invite them. In fact, they're often, if they're unpleasant emotions, they're not welcome. If we can really demonstrate listening and that we want to know how they're feeling, even if it isn't pleasant, so we can help them understand what that's telling them. It builds trust with them. And yeah, they're going to actually surprise us like that. They can handle being asked and they can tell you honestly. And if we make it really safe with written, regular opportunities to keep sharing, then we're going to start to hear what we need to hear. That's going to help us make what's an easy shift to meet that child where they are and get them back on track instead of being stuck in an emotional roadblock for maybe the rest of the year.
Helping students self-regulate, having a framework such as your book to help educators lead those conversations with students. Because again, as you said, Maureen, it's in play in our classrooms anyway. So we might as well, especially on the secondary level. So that aid that we talk about, it makes sense to me that when this is done well and this is done right, as James was saying, you are going to have those teachers going, wow, this really works. So the flip side of that is this question, which is when it hasn't worked, what have you noticed was causing that? Or when it doesn't work, what are the conditions that usually lead it not to work? And what advice would you have for any school administrator or teacher who picks up your book to not fall into those traps?
My response to this one would be that in the book, we focus on fostering 4 foundational cultural conditions in your classroom. And they are: 1, the work is genuinely motivating. So it's great if you're having students set a goal before an assignment. But if the assignment is just going through a worksheet and writing facts that they learned 3 days ago, they're not going to be motivated. The second condition is leadership opportunities. So sometimes when teachers don't fully commit to that student voice and agency, they go, I did this one reflection exercise and it didn't change anything. The third condition is safety to take risks. And this is true for kids. So often, kids are not raising their hand because they're worried they have the wrong answer. But it's also true for us adults. I remember being a classroom teacher thinking, please don't let the principal walk into my room. And of course, what I should have been saying was, please send me a more experienced educator to help me get better at this. Part of the process was being vulnerable and getting help from others who could see what my areas for improvement were. So number 3 is really fostering that safety. And so sometimes people don't fully commit because they don't feel safe to. I've been teaching the same teacher-centered curriculum for 12 years. And when I'm doing that, I think I'm a good teacher and I'm worried if I do something totally different, it won't go well. That will be the death of my identity as a good teacher. I do not want to mourn that identity. I love that identity. It's really important to foster that safety that enables an educator to go, you know what? I'm going to try this out. And actually, it won't work. Every time it doesn't work, I'm going to learn something that will help me get closer to it works. And then the fourth condition is belief in self and others. An educator really needs to believe in themselves, believe in their kids. If I take this risk and I mix up the way I'm doing things, I am going to learn a lot and I'm going to foster a class that is more engaging, that is more joyful, that is more achievement oriented. Every single child in here has the potential to meet the leadership opportunities that I'm going to give to them and make rapid progress toward their potential as a result. You need to commit. You just need to, even if you just start with one routine, commit to that, do it regularly, stick with it, knowing that as time goes on, you'll have more and more capacity to try the next thing and the next thing. And your class might not miraculously become a different class tomorrow, but over time, you and your students will keep making gradual progress towards this dream class that you envision.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of your kids will still struggle to find motivation. Even if you have committed and you have worked through what we see a lot, which is anxiety or worry about releasing control, which is very much in play for teachers wondering, should I try this? The idea of letting go of the reins is very scary, and fear is operating for all of us in a lot of ways. Let's say you've done that, you've committed, you've done it for everyone. There are still going to be some students who need more. And so we do provide in the units, here are some follow-up stances and questions and things that we might recommend to address some of the most common issues. But yeah, there are some students who have a lot of behaviors that are very difficult, or who have a lot of complex trauma or other things that are getting in the way for them that might hopefully find support with a collaborator in your building. So when we say, like in the collaborate chapter at the end, just to go to another angels might be singing example, we have this really structured set of group roles that's based on leadership roles. So the project manager, if we really wanted to fully release, they're in charge of setting all the timelines, assigning all the tasks. Always somebody wants to be the project manager because the project manager knows who they are and they are born to be the project manager. And then someone who's the facilitator, and their job is to resolve conflicts that probably will come up on the team. They have toolkits that are based on the kinds of tools that a leadership training program would offer for resolving conflict. So I think that's just another challenge to anticipate, is you're going to also still be valuable even as you release control by circulating, noticing some skill gaps, coming in and providing that additional support for structure or scaffold as needed, but giving kids the chance not to need you first and seeing what they come up with that you would have never come up with. If you don't find it motivating, what can you do? Again, it's putting to the kids in a way that helps you all to say it's your job then to find adjustments. And I'm here and happy to come along with you for that ride. But again, it's a little more chaos, and also it can be really beautiful and wonderful. And you're still really important in the room.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, Maureen. This is actually a real example. Asking a teacher to do more turn and talks, give their students a little bit more control. And I think you both hit on something, that fear of losing control. Because I'm thinking of this one teacher who then started asking me, of course, if I ever taught these kind of kids. My kids aren't just going to do this. To James's point, that it's a process. And I'm glad that your book can serve as a tool to help educators through that process. These kids do need to develop their own skills. So, to your point, Maureen, what could you be doing if you're noticing that students are not turning and talking in that example? What are you doing to help them with that? Are you circulating? Are you moving around? Are you giving them maybe a guiding question, or focusing them in on what they could be talking about? So I could see where, yes, that could be a challenge, because this is really, your framework is really asking teachers to think differently. I'm starting to see that shift in how we view ourselves as teachers, where it is less about, I'm the sage, I have the knowledge, I'm imparting knowledge to you, which I think traditionally has been our education model. I am starting to see, and I know in my own work at Brooklyn College teaching student teachers, we're doing more around, no, you're more the facilitator. How are you moving around the room? How are you setting up the conditions in your classroom to allow your students to self-actualize? And again, I think what you're really advocating for and what you've really provided is a tool to help educators do that. So we've talked about a lot. What have we not talked about that you want the listeners to know?
Over the years, we have often heard well-intentioned teachers talking about, quote, these kids. And it is at the root of everything we do, the belief that these kids are good kids, these kids are capable kids. And the students who don't feel a sense of belonging, the students who are not engaging and experiencing regular success and validation, these are the ones who benefit the most from a framework like this. And so we have written this book. We're so grateful for all educators. And we have written this book for all students. We love kids. There's nothing either of us enjoys more than just hanging out with a 14-year-old or a 17-year-old. But especially, we have written this book for those kids who are not experiencing belonging and success within the walls of our schools. And we really believe if you give those students the attention that they need and you really listen to them, what are your feelings? What are your ideas? What are your questions? And you build a relationship through that learning, those students are going to show you this glimmering potential that they have that you never would have guessed. And it's going to be so good for them and for their families and for their futures. That's why we got into this. We got into this because we love teaching, we love learning, but probably more than anything else, we love young people and want to be there during a really important time in their life.
Love it. And as you were talking, James, I'm also thinking about the power of your book and your work for equity and ensuring that, again, this is a tool to help every student, each student, to find their voice. And
Just that the educators too, that belief in self and others applies for us. When an educator is saying, I used to do a project, but I stopped doing it because the kids can't handle it, really they're in some way insecure about their own ability to support the kids of that class where it took a little more skill to get there. And I know for myself growing up, I got emotions education from Sesame Street and the end. That was the end of it. So if we want to ask teachers to be supporting students to be emotionally intelligent and they haven't had the curriculum on that the way they've had the curriculum on math or history, then we are hopeful that this process they can engage in together with the students in a way that renews their belief in themselves, their alignment to their values of being the kind of teacher they want to be. And that will also hopefully make the work more rewarding because we believe in young people and we believe in teachers. They are so incredibly important and valuable in the field. And the kids deserve teachers who've been around and for people to stay long enough to have the experience that it takes to really become excellent at such a difficult craft. So we think for equity and also for teacher sense of efficacy and belonging and reward. Also, we just genuinely want everyone to see themselves or reframe their thinking of themselves as a leader and not just the archetypal leader that you might hold in your mind when you hear that word at first.
Maureen, where can people find out more information about you and the work that you're doing?
You can go to Core Creative Partners. Core is Latin for heart, so it is COR, creativepartners.com. James and I are both also on LinkedIn. We'd be so happy to hear from anyone who's just got thoughts or is trying things or wants to think about how this might look in their own setting.
James, how about you?
Yeah, we're on LinkedIn and we are out in the world. Send us a message, Maureen. We really love to talk with fellow educators and learn from them. We're so grateful to you, John, for this chance to talk about this work that we care so much about and for all your leadership in the field. Thank you very much for having us. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
For our listeners who are joining us, I will be posting in the show notes many of the tools and the things that we've talked about. You could also find out more information about our guests there because I will also link to their LinkedIn bios. James, Maureen, thank you so much for joining us today. Getting over this fear and releasing this control to students because we really do need to create students that are able to be more independent and are able to self-regulate themselves some more, and who have the motivation, have the passion, can collaborate. So I'm glad your tool and your book is out there. James and Maureen, again, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
John.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you got some great tips that you can bring back into your teaching. Remember, have a life teaching without sacrificing your own. Also, don't forget to subscribe and be well.